to do so. Any questions, anything that you requests for information, anything that you would like to bring to our attention or find out, and if you want to come to the podium, and we welcome your comments.
My name's Karen Anderson. I live on Woodland Avenue. And some years ago, when Bruce was our councilman, we had a fence put up at Forest Park to keep people from going up behind the private properties on Woodland and Ethan Allen and Prince George's Avenue. There's a large section of woods there. Well, they built the fence that butted up to Brian Beach's fence. He lives at 431 Ethan Allen, and his fence was set on fire and burned down. So we need some kind of fencing. All the other parks in Tacoma Park are fenced away from the private properties, so now this one isn't. And so we need to just revisit the rest of the fencing, seeing as how Brian hasn't put his fence back up in a year. He did come to the council and asked for their advice and help, and they said they'd take it under advisement, but he never heard back anything. So as it is now, the fence that the city erected is still there, but it butted up to Brian's fence, which prevented people from going through the woods. But now Brian's fence is burned down, so we need some other fencing put up to protect the property owners.
And that's the property back there is the where all the super lots go back into the woods.
Yes, where the lots from Ethan Allen and Woodland Avenue all come down and meet there in the middle of
So it's private property, but it looks like woods.
Yes, it is. So, but we would appreciate it if you could do something, because there have been some fires and different things and burglaries, so we don't want the back of our properties to be vulnerable. Plus the fact many of us bought those properties because I've been there 42 years and bought it because it was tranquil. So anyway, I'd appreciate you looking into making the fence so that the woods are fenced off. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding us of that. Somebody else? Don't be shy. Sure. And if anybody's more comfortable sitting in a chair rather than standing at the podium, that's available as well.
Okay, well, this just very brief. My name is Vic Simon. I live on Cheney Drive. I read that you approved a bond issue last meeting, or sometime maybe in January, for your public works thing, and I guess I just view the financial situation as almost a different planet from the way you see it. Today, Leggett proposed the first county budget that actually decreases spending from the year before. He's had, I think, 2 or 3 mid-fiscal year budget cuts. There's no reason that that's going to stop yet, and the same with the state. That bond issue is just a guarantee of laying off employees of the city over the next few years.
I would say that we're looking at some equally grim situations as the state and the county are looking at. I also know from talking with folks both at the county and the state that they view capital projects as kind of differently than operating, and that in many ways now is kind of the best environment for capital projects if it's something that's really needed. The contractors tend to be available, prices are much lower than they had been, and interest rates are quite low, and so the cost of doing these types of projects is probably as low as anything we're going to see. And what we had to do was balance the costs for that with the fact that the facilities are all 50 years old. The infrastructure up there is quite worn out, and that once we did the study to see what might be needed up there, we had a number of issues that were called to our attention that if we didn't address those, there were some real inequities that were quite obvious that could haunt us if we didn't deal with them. So I think we felt that it was the prudent thing to do. I would say that I think we recognize the fiscal reality that we're all dealing with, and it doesn't mean that we don't spend any money, and I think that all of us on the council were convinced that that was something that we had to do. So, but thanks for your thoughts on that.
My name is Marguerite Sear. I live at 403 Boyd. I actually have two things. One is Boyd Avenue appears to be disintegrating, particularly in front of my house. It's gotten worse since the storm, but the area that's in front of 403 Avenue has always been a patch-up job. Every one of them has been not very well done, and it's really bad right now. I mean, there's dirt bubbling up through the road, so it's just a matter of before it becomes a dangerous pothole situation. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I know that we've had a lot of restoration of roads around here, and Boyd really needs to be on that list. And the other one is that years ago, a lot of us in the neighborhood met about the traffic on Boyd Avenue, and one of the solutions was to decrease the amount of traffic on Jackson by posting a sign that disallowed a right turn coming from the east to the west on East-West Highway. So during peak rush hour times, you're not allowed to turn right there. And the original intent of the committee, because I was on it, was that that would be that would be local traffic only. In the meantime, the traffic is turning on Elm Avenue, and it has absolutely no impact. So I would, on the amount of traffic on Boyd Avenue, because I drive in that direction every morning, and it hasn't changed anything on Boyd Avenue. I have two ideas. One is to make both Elm and Jackson residential traffic only, and don't ticket people who live in the neighborhood. The other one is just take the sign down on Jackson, because it's not doing any good. It's just keeping people who live in the neighborhood from turning into their own neighborhood without getting. You turn in there and they give you a ticket if you're 5 seconds, off from the time frame. So I don't think it's effective, and I think it needs to be looked at again. But anyway, those are the two things I wanted to say.
So I actually talked to the city manager tonight about the car-sized patch, and I guessed 404 Boyd, so I was close. And asked them what they could do about it. It seems like it's a large hole. And the other thing is, I completely and totally agree with you about Jackson Avenue. I mean, the problem is that people are going across East-West Highway. The housing is in Prince George's County, and the jobs are in Bethesda, and they're driving from where the bedrooms are at to where the jobs are at, and because the junction is a dysfunctional intersection, because it's a two-lane road and there's a lot of capacity, people come through the neighborhoods. And the impact, first, of closing off Manor Circle and then of doing the turn at Jackson Avenue has been, it hasn't deterred people. They still have to go to their jobs. They just now enter the neighborhood back at Elm Avenue, and we spent whatever, $30,000 on a traffic circle at Elm and Lincoln, just trying to get the people to slow down as they went through that intersection. So I would agree that that's not functional. The issue, though, is that in the state of Maryland, you cannot enforce a residential only sign, and so there's still a place, I think, on Eastern Avenue where it says local traffic only going into Holly Avenue. I don't know that sign's been taken down, but it's, I think, essentially unenforceable. And so we looked at it. And I think you talked to the Attorney General, didn't you, to ask, when I asked about this, to get verification that we couldn't do that?
Because it was an issue I dealt with in Montgomery County.
Microphone.
We can't hear you. They can't hear you on the television audience. Can't hear you.
I looked at it when you had asked me to, because it had been an issue in Montgomery County before, and I checked the court ruling on it. Hasn't changed. You cannot have a sign that restricts residential. Now, Montgomery County still has a few up, but it's not enforceable if you go to court and challenge it. And I didn't know of any in the city. until she just mentioned that one. I don't think I've seen that one, but we can't. The bottom line is we are writing those tickets, but yes, we can't discriminate on who we write, and we have put an emphasis on them. And as you well know, we haven't slowed down the cut-through traffic, even with the traffic circle.
Right. And then I would say that even if we put a no right turn sign at Elm, which people have asked for along that block, what's going to happen is they're going to turn right onto New Hampshire Avenue, because they're already doing this to some extent, and they're going to come in at, I don't know if you can come in at Auburn, but maybe you can come in at, there's someone here from Devonshire. You can come in on Devonshire, and they're already experiencing that traffic, or they'll come in on Larch, and they're still going to come into the neighborhood. And it's impossible to make a hard wall, essentially, all the way along New Hampshire up to East-West Highway. So, why don't we take a break?
Let's take a break, Bruce.
Take a break for 5 minutes.
Can we talk out?
Okay, I think we're ready to get started again. And I have particular sympathy for Mr. Lovelace's situation. I had to leave our meeting a few weeks ago, and I was feeling in the same shape as he was, although I
Thankfully,
You made it out of the room.
I made it out of the room. So I hope he's feeling better. We were hearing from folks, and one thing I did want to point out, that there's a sign up in the back, and we wanted to make sure that we got information for everybody who comes from Ward 2, so that if there are particular concerns that somebody wants to get back to you on, that we've got the information. So maybe after you sign it in the back, if you could just bring it forward and pass it, so that when that clipboard comes through, if you can provide some information, we'd appreciate it. Would somebody else like to make any comments?
don't be shy.
You stayed.
I wasn't going to say a whole lot, but somebody mentioned the Woods and Woodland, which I believe is owned by the McLaughlin School, and last year I had a request from an elderly resident because kudzu from that property was growing up in the trees and growing onto her property, so that's something to keep an eye on. I did talk to Todd about it, so hopefully there'll be a little enforcement there. I mentioned to the mayor that we do have some gang issues in our neighborhood, and I think we would appreciate advice in terms of what to do, where to report what we see, because I haven't got a clue what to look for, or, you know, what's worth reporting, what's not worth reporting, and how to do that. And then I know what's been a hot issue in the city is sidewalks, and I just want to let you know that not everybody wants sidewalks that doesn't have them. They do cause impervious surface, they do damage tree roots, and we don't need them on all the streets. Thank you.
Anything about gangs?
We have a gang liaison for the city. It's Detective Charlie Holtzel, Hoetzel. And if you call our main number, 301-270-1100, they will connect you to Charlie. If he's not there, he has voicemail, and you can leave a message. We probably are due, and we're discussing, I have two guys that are in Baltimore this week on gang issues, and we'll probably do a community gang update to try to help you out, because I'm going to give a little report later tonight, which is gang-related. Anything that looks to you suspicious, or where it's a bunch of kids gathering, or you just seeing multiple gatherings at times. Take down any tag numbers or any descriptions or locations, and you can give it to us, and we're going to follow it up. But it's important. Don't worry about what you think it may be or not be. We want you to call. That's my message from day one here. Calls, but we do have a gang detective that has very much knowledge of what's going on in the city and would appreciate the information.
Other questions or comments, observations?
I came in late. I don't know. Karen Anderson, I thought she was here, but I don't know. Did she discuss the fence or? Yes. Okay, because I'm the one whose fence used to be there. So I don't know if any input is needed for me, but I don't plan to replace it anytime soon. So. I'm on Ethan Allen, yeah. Yeah, my fence runs the length of Prince George's. Yeah, yeah. So. She mentioned it, and I just couldn't get here in time. So. Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it's my responsibility for the security of the rest of the neighborhood. So. I may put up something.
Can you come to the microphone?
At a later date to just delineate the property, but I really, it doesn't bother me if people are wandering back and forth. So.
Daryl, did you want to add anything on the fence topic? About the, I guess, remind me of your name, Mr. Hetzel? Beach.
Brian Beach. Yeah.
His fence.
His fence burned down a year ago. It made a part of the 3 parts of the fence that protect the yards in between Forest Park and his property. Then now that his fence burned down, as I recall, his insurance company didn't want to pay anywhere near what it cost to replace it, and he doesn't want to foot the bill for public safety for the entire neighborhood because people use that as a way to go up into the woods, and they've been going up into the woods and being mischievous and breaking windows in people's basements and starting little fires in the backwoods, and it's all on private property. And Karen Anderson's point is that she feels that there is a fence that is around all of the other public parks, and they would like to know if we have a plan to replace the section of the fence that runs from the back short stub essentially across his property where I guess the city put in a fence, but they stopped it where he had a fence so they didn't have to duplicate. And now there's an open area from the one corner around to whoever the person's house is at the end of Prince George's, and I don't know the name of that person. They're not.
I just don't have enough information about the subject at hand. We can take a look into it and through Barb get information to you. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Mayor Porter, you don't have anything to say?
I just want to find out what's going on in Ward 2.
Councilmember Clay, is there anything you'd like to bring up?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I think we lost a few people in our brief interlude, but we did have some people who were here who were talking about traffic calming issues on Devonshire Avenue, and we had some mention of the issues around Boyd, and I know that there continue to be issues in Long Branch Sligo, and I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge for the city, and in the sense that Ward 2 has all these boundaries that run up against the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. It continues to be a challenge for us as well, and so I hope that we're able to work together as a community to resolve some of these issues. I know it's difficult. I know that we have do we have a conversation scheduled for the Sligo Park Hills plan to blockade Sligo Park Hills, which I think will have a disproportionate impact on potentially on Lincoln Avenue and Sligo Creek Parkway and Flower Avenue. So other than that, I like being the Ward 2 council person. It's a pretty happy place. I have the sort of the uber fun-loving crowd now. I think in Ward 2 overall is the Forest Park gang. Very, very hardy and planning all kinds of neighborhood get-togethers and potlucks. And I think it used to be that way in Long Branch, Sligo, and I don't see any folks from Long Branch here tonight, but I would challenge them to try to reclaim that title. Oh, okay, great, and reinvigorate their neighborhood association. And to that end, I think I would like us at some point to be able to talk about more things that we can do to support our neighborhood associations, because one of the things that I know in Ward 2 is that we've had strong representation from our neighborhood associations at various times, but we get a little bit of ebb and flow, and I think that if we had maybe a little bit more support from the city, getting out newsletters is a challenge for neighborhood associations. I know we're talking about now using some funding to fund newsletter startup in Ward 6. We have some challenges now in funding the newsletter for Long Branch, Sligo Neighborhood Association. I haven't seen a paper neighborhood association newsletter for Saska, which also incorporates Forest Park for a long time, and I think that's a lot of the ways that people connect and learn about neighborhood leadership, which I think is really important, in which we need to foster and nurture in our community. We've been pretty lucky in Ward 2. We have a lot of leaders in our community, but I think it doesn't mean that we don't have to work on that issue. So I guess that's something that I would like to see with Ward 2, and we'll be thinking about ways to help encourage that. So if any of the constituents have any ideas or things that they want to pass forward, I'm certainly ready to listen to that and work on that as a project.
Councilmember Robinson.
I have an anecdote along those lines, Colleen, that might be helpful. The other, I guess it was last week, one of the neighborhood associations in Ward 3 had a developer in, and that developer wants to develop a piece of property that he owns on Eastern in New Hampshire. And two adjoining neighborhood associations came to that meeting, and all three were very clear about their feelings about this particular development. And the developer walked away appreciative, not necessarily that he got the answer he was after, but he was appreciative that he got a broad-based sense of what all three neighborhoods wanted. It helped him, I think, make a decision, and I think it'll be helpful for all of those neighborhood associations. So, to that same point, the little communication can go a long way, and a little collaboration can make for good decisions.
Been joined by a couple more folks in the last few minutes. Anything that you want to bring up? Tell us? Ask?
Is this the public segment?
Yes.
This is the Ward 2.
Oh, what?
Okay. Catherine, did you have something else?
Just a very quick addition in response to what Colleen was saying about building community. I'd like to let people know that we have a South of Sligo website, which is actually pretty nice that we had a neighbor put that together, and I think it's southofsligo.org. We've got pictures from the neighborhood, what's going on, links to Colleen's page and other pages as well. So visit the website.
Yeah, and I continue to have feeds to the city's crime reports and status reports on my website, the ColleenClay.com website.
Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to continuing to do these ward nights. We've now done wards 3, 6, and 2, and we have 3 more to go, and then we will cycle through again, and there will be other opportunities for you to come. There's also another opportunity if anybody's interested. The end of this month, March 29th, 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have, we're not going to have a formal council meeting, but what we are going to do is have an opportunity for people to come down to this building. We'll be kind of set up out in the atrium and in here again, and it'll be an opportunity to provide information and to get feedback and any of your thoughts about the possibilities for going to the state legislature next year in the legislative session to request, if people decide that's what we want to do, to request a change in state law so that there could be the possibility for off-site sales of alcohol in the city. There currently is only one location for that, which is a grandfathered location from Prince George's County. It's up on New Hampshire Avenue in the Tacoma-Langley area. Some people, particularly in Old Town, have been approached by a number of business owners who wanted to open up like a wine store. And currently in the city, you can't do that. So this is a chance for everybody to come together and get some information and share thoughts or concerns about the possibility for doing that. It's by no means a done deal that we're going to do that. We want to hear what people think. So if you or any people you know have any opinions about that or any input that you want to give us, or if you just want to learn more, you're welcome to come down 2 weeks from tonight at 7:30. We hope to have other opportunities like that to just focus in a little bit less formal setting on any particular issue that seems appropriate to gather input on, and not just have to kind of rely on the back and forth in a more formal meeting. This is an attempt to do a little bit less formal and give people an opportunity on a ward basis, but there may be other opportunities for particular topics as well. So stay tuned for any of those types of meetings that might come up in the future. And thank you all again for coming. And we'll now move to the council comments section of our meeting. And maybe if I can start off with a couple. One thing I did want to point out is that census forms from this year's 2010 census, I understand, have started arriving in mailboxes today. So please be sure that you fill out and return your census. And if you see any of your neighbors and have a chance to bring it up, please make sure that they turn theirs in as well. It's one of the most important things that you can do to make sure that the city will get all of the funding that we're due on a number of levels, from the federal government, from state government, and a lot of it is based on population. So we want to make sure that everybody is counted. So we'd appreciate any efforts that you can help us with that. I wanted to just let folks know that I had a couple opportunities to meet with people over the last few weeks. One that I just wanted to mention was I had a visit from a reporter for the Sankei Shimbun, which is one of the big 5 newspapers in Japan. I think that literally translates as industrial and economic newspaper. Shimbun is newspaper. And he's the U.S. editor. And he was coming to Tacoma Park and a couple other locations in Maryland because the National Assembly in Japan is considering passing a law that all state and local elections in Japan will have non-citizen voting. And so he wanted to get a flavor of how that's working in this city, how it came about, if there were any particular problems. I had the idea that this was partly seen as a way of dealing with Japanese residents who are Korean, who, shall we say, ended up in Japan not necessarily of their own volition, and they are not, I guess, able to be citizens, and how to incorporate their input into what's going on. So it was an interesting discussion, and interesting that they were getting input from places like Tacoma Park, Somerset, Barnesville, other places in Montgomery County who have non-citizen voting, because he said there's this cluster here, and wondering why there was a cluster here. So it was a very interesting conversation. Also wanted to say that I had the privilege again this year of judging some of the cars at the Pinewood Derby that the Troop 33 held. They hold that every year at the Presbyterian Church. And every year, I, as my predecessors, go and judge some of the contests there. Also, I had the opportunity to testify last week in Annapolis on House Bill 475, which is the Sustainable Community Act. That's one of the governor's priorities, and it's for the combining of various programs, but one of the important things was to return the funding for historic preservation grants back into true grants or credits rather than into true credits rather than the grants that they've become, and had the opportunity to talk with state planning folks and folks from the governor's office and testify for that, and that will be very important as the assembly goes forward. Also, while there, it was the day that the city of Frederick had their annual reception for legislators in Annapolis. So I got to go and talk with our compatriots from Frederick and also talk with some of the legislators from Frederick County, and that's always very interesting to talk with people who invariably say, oh, I used to live in Tacoma Park, or my favorite, I was born in Tacoma Park. So that was a good opportunity. I also had the opportunity yesterday to attend the 22nd anniversary of Tacoma Park Lesbians and Gays Brunch. We've had a brunch every month for 22 years. And it was good to see that that organization is maintaining that. Never missed a month. Also wanted to bring up for my colleagues that we've had a request from the Tacoma Foundation that they would like to hold the Azalea Awards on May 15th. That's a Saturday night in the newly renovated and should be available auditorium. And it was something where they had that request last year, and we said yes, that was fine, and that was going to be a free of charge use of the facilities. We haven't had the discussion in anticipation of reopening of that facility about the use policies. We will have those soon, but in the absence of that discussion, they wanted to make sure that they could use that facility again. So I did want to bring it up and get my colleagues' input as to whether we want to just say, yes, that's fine for another year, and then we'll have the policy discussion about community use shortly and deal with that and similar requests in that discussion. Is that something that people want to do? Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think we should agree to that tonight and then have the policy discussion at a later time. I agree.
Okay. I see affirmative head nods, so we will let the Tacoma Foundation know.
Thank you.
And the other thing that I just wanted to bring up briefly was I had a discussion today with the Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department about the county executive's budget and the potential impact on fire and rescue service in this area of the county, Tacoma Park in particular. I'm going to be working with the president of the Volunteer Fire Department and others in preparation for budget testimony at the county budget hearing. I believe I'm going to be signed up for 3 weeks from tomorrow, April 6th, and testify on behalf of the city. And one of the things that I'll be working on is dealing with the proposed movement of some equipment and some removal from service of some equipment that affects Truck 2, which has been promised for some time now to come back to the city when the fire station opens. The current date that has not been changed for the fire station reopening is June 1, and the new budget year will start July 1. And under the county executive's proposal, the Truck 2 would move. I can't remember whether it's either Station 12 or 16, which would be either over by Blair High School or up at Hillendale.
Again?
Up New Hampshire. We're going through this again. And one of the things that is changed that may not be clear to a number of folks at the county, particularly the executive and the county council, it may be clear to the Fire and Rescue Service, is that there have been changes in what the level of service that Prince George's County is providing, and Prince George's County has already closed Station 44, which is the one over on Riggs Road at Sargent Road, which is the one that's closest to the city. They've also reduced service by quite a bit at Station 34, which is on Riggs Road at University Boulevard across from TikTok. so that the two closest Prince George's stations to us who might be available to provide first due service, if it's not available from Montgomery County, are pretty much not there. And in fact, the equipment from over here along the border is in fact running a lot more calls into Prince George's County because the Prince George's County folks just aren't there. So I'll be talking with my colleagues about what my testimony might contain, but I just wanted to let you know that that issue came up today. Are there other council comments? Councilmember Snipper.
Yes, I want to reiterate your census comment. My understanding is that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 a year per person. So if somebody is missed in our city, it costs the local community about $1,000. And over the 10-year period, that's $10,000, which is a non-trivial amount of money. So I urge you to talk to your friends and neighbors, as well as you're filling it out yourselves, and those watching, to make sure folks fill it out. There's a lot of misunderstandings about the census. Please check them out. Don't let it be a reason not to fill it out. There have been some people trying to do scams. They come to the door and say, I'm from the census, please give me your social security number, bank number, and so on. The census will never ask any of that information. Nothing, no information like that. They don't send emails. They all have official badges, and they only ask 10 questions. It's really simple. So please do your part and fill out the census. And then the second thing on the audit, well, when we have the discussion, I'll talk about the auditorium.
I just wanted to pass along, Mr. Lovelace sent his apologies for interrupting the meeting earlier. And he said he looks very much forward to coming back when he's in better condition.
I said I had a lot of sympathy for his position. Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to follow up on your comment about the truck number 2. It concerns me, as it should concern all of us in Takoma Park, and I look forward to consulting with you on that as to how we can make the best possible case to the county. I had the opportunity last week to go to Annapolis to testify before one of the budget committees with regard to 2 programs that the city of Takoma Park has taken great advantage of in recent years. One of those is the Neighborhood Business Works program, which is a program that uses state money to make loans to neighborhood businesses in conjunction with bank loans for those businesses to be able to modify or improve their buildings. And a second program called the Neighborhood, I think it's a Neighborhood Legacy Program. No? Community Legacy Program. Thank you, Ms. Daines. Appreciate your always accurate advice. And this is a program that the city has used extensively in Old Town, as well as along New Hampshire Avenue and other places, to do a tremendous amount of improvement in the public areas, sidewalks, and also to help certain businesses with regard to things that needed to be done to improve the overall commercial environment. And it's really critical because this helps to stimulate new businesses to grow and prosper and to attract businesses. And when you do that, you help attract customers. The reason I went down there is that one of the recommendations was that these programs, both of them, should be cut by 50% in the coming fiscal year. And I at least tried to make the point that in this environment where, the recessionary environment, that this is not the time when the state should be cutting back financing for these kinds of purposes. And I spoke about some other things related to that. but at least I had a chance to represent the city's interests in regard to those two programs, which we've taken great advantage of and want to continue to do so. We also participated in a meeting between city and Montgomery County officials about a week ago with regard to commercial signage. And it was basically an information meeting to talk about, to understand better how commercial signs are zoned and regulated in the county. Some of us, particularly myself, aren't fully apprised of it. And we learned a good bit about how permanent signs are permitted and how temporary signs are permitted, or to the extent that they're not. Because I think there's concern in the community to the extent that maybe some signs are being put up that don't belong there or that are not proper. That was a very helpful thing. We learned some things. I don't have the time now to go into the details about it, but I just want you to know it's an issue that I want to stay close to and be working with the city staff in that regard. Following up on, finally, the last thing was the census. I just wanted to add is that not only is the census coming out, but the Census Bureau has jobs available for people who want jobs as census enumerators. And this is a very serious job offer. These are real jobs, temporary, clearly temporary, but in this economy, sometimes temporary sounds pretty good. And they're not just census enumerator positions, but other positions that go up from that. So if you know of anybody, including yourself, that might be interested, get in touch with that. There's information on the city's website with regard to those kinds of, how to find out about those positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Two items. One is, we got our information about the stormwater, rewriting of the stormwater regulation from Darrell. I think it was either last week or the week before. And I was talking to Catherine Tunis about the fact that there is a part of the task force for the environment that's dedicated to stormwater management. And I'm not sure that their report is going to be out in time to, based on when we have to have the regulation rewritten, because I think we have to turn it in May or something like that, Darrell, is that right?
By May 4th.
May 4th?
It actually has to be in effect by May 4th of 2010. It was due November 11th to the state. Just to clarify, the situation with the stormwater ordinances specifically for new construction or redevelopment issues, of which we have 3 to 6 applications a year citywide. So it's not the overall stormwater management program that we're addressing. It's the city's stormwater code that goes into effect anytime anyone is affecting more than 5,000 square feet in a residential property, or anytime any commercial, industrial, or institutional development is taking place. So it's fairly limited, but I understand your point.
They might have, I think there may be some ideas that they have around even that limited amount, so we might want to just either ask them if they have any thoughts and bring them into the process, I think would be helpful.
I've attended a few meetings, so I'd be happy to talk with them again. I think their interest is a fairly more broad interest of ways of encouraging residents to take care of stormwater issues on their own property, not related to development, but just in general, good housekeeping and better management. Mm-hmm.
And if I can just add on that, I had brought up a concern about any possible changes at the state legislature this year that would affect what we would have to have in effect, or potentially make it so that we would have to change after the May 4th deadline. And I just wanted to let folks know that those conversations have resulted in some agreement among various parties in Annapolis about certain changes that would take place, so that it may not be the case that there is legislation from the General Assembly to change that, but kind of some changes in the administrative regs. And we've got a copy of those that have been agreed to by all the parties, and I've forwarded those along to the city manager. And so I think some of the concerns I had about waiting and trying to wait till the last minute to see what those changes are, we now know what those changes are, so that if we get a sense from the task force, and it sounds like Darrell has a good handle on that. It may be that some of the concerns about trying to wait to make sure any last-minute changes would take effect may not be a concern that we have to continue to worry about.
Great. And then the second thing I just want to talk about is that April is shaping up to be a very exciting month for new businesses that are going to be opening in the Tacoma Park, city of Tacoma Park, particularly in the Old Town and Junction area. The Tacoma Park Bicycles has been announced to open next to Amano. The Green Commuter, which is an electric bike store, will be in the Junction. There's a new CD game exchange and basically record exchange, used records, CDs, and video games at the Old American Craft site, which is next to Roscoe's. Capital City Cheesecake, very exciting also, will be going into the old Savory space. And then the Old Town Tacoma Hardware store will be opening also, Knockwood, still in April. And then also Still Point is moving from its current location. It's done so well, they're moving to a larger location on the corner of Columbia and Carroll. A lot of this is due to very hard work put in by the landlords, but also due to the Old Town Business Association, in particular, the Executive Director, Roz Grigsby, who's in the audience here. So we have her to thank for those many new businesses, and we should keep that in mind as we think about our budget and the relatively small but very important grant that we give to OTBA to do work like this every year, which I think is very beneficial to the city and money well spent.
Councilmember Robinson.
I'll follow up on that. Thank the old OTBA and Roz and all those businesses. I think are in your ward, Josh. No, except for the Green Commuter. And thank you for that. We have a few more storefronts, so bring your magic down my way, please. Okay, that's good to hear. I'm very glad to hear that. In another business note, I'll come back and just thank the neighborhood associations, Circle Woods and Wacko and Pinecrest for all gathering last week and giving a developer who wants to develop yet another parcel on eastern and New Hampshire some direct and potent feedback to give him guidance on what things he might do there that would please the neighborhoods and the people in them. So I appreciate that they all showed up for that. And finally, again, something, Josh, that relates to both of us, and that is that the park in Old Town where the gazebo is and the grassy part down below is in my ward and the gazebo part's in your ward. And the neighbors in Wacko have, at their last meeting, came to have a very strong feeling that they'd like to rename that park. It's got a little bit of a funny history. It has been called Tacoma Urban Park for a good long while. Nobody really knew that. And then Park and Planning put up a sign, but they forgot the word urban, so it just says Tacoma Park, which people chuckle over. And now the idea is to get the sign changed, but even more to change the name of the park. And the name that's being circulated is Gilbert Combe Park. And Gilbert Combe was a well-respected and much loved resident of Wacko who died last year. And so I'm going to start to find out how to make that happen in Old Town. And I want to just bring that to everyone's attention. I don't know the extent to which we want to have a broader conversation about that. Wacko's open to a broader conversation, but I will be pursuing at least the methods to get the name changed so that we can have some background on that. That's all.
And if I can just piggyback on that for a second, the city clerk and I have been talking about the schedule for whatever the city is going to do to recognize the change from Jecky Park to Bell Ziegler Park. And that's going to be coming up this spring, and it's partly waiting on the ordering of the signs, and there was something else. And is there any update you can provide in terms of a sense of timing on that?
Right. The signs are being ordered, and I've been in communication with Montgomery County Parks regarding, not that they have to approve the name change, but regarding how to incorporate the new name on various maps and resources. So I'm looking into that and waiting for a response from them.
We anticipate that that will be coming up fairly soon in terms of changing park names.
Great.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which is, there are no additional agenda items, and just in terms of a scheduling update, I just wanted to provide a couple of quick reminders. Next week, on March 22nd, we'll be joined by County Council Member Mark Elrich, who will be giving us an update, particularly his perspective on the county budget. And a whole lot of resolutions are on the agenda, and also a work session discussing the City Lot and Tacoma Junction issues. That's a continuing discussion. Then, as I mentioned earlier, March 29th is the community discussion about the possibility for changing state law regarding alcoholic beverage sales. April 5th, the city manager presents her proposed budget. The Emergency Preparedness Committee report is due, and there will be some winter snow follow-up report. And
follow-up, I thought you meant there's more winter snow.
There could be. I remember mid-April storms. And then Monday, April 12th, is the first public hearing opportunity on the city manager's proposed FY11 budget. So we plan, as we have for a number of years now, of having a public hearing on the proposed budget at the beginning of the process, and also a public hearing at the end of the process. And then there's also other opportunities for public comment as well on the budget as we get to first and second readings of the budget, so that there are at least 4 opportunities for testimony on the budget. So I just want to point those items out to folks. Next item is adoption of minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes from January 4th and January 11th. Would somebody like to move that approval?
Move adoption.
It sounds like moved by Councilmember Siemens and second by Councilmember Snipper. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. And the next item on our agenda is public comment period. And this is an opportunity for anybody who has anything that they want to talk about that isn't on a legislative agenda. And if you go to the microphone, and please identify yourself and try and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Welcome.
My name is Richard Payne. I live at 39 Oswego Avenue, and I'm the president of the Ritchie Citizens Association. I'm here joined by Pepe Contreras Vidal, Wayne Willis of Ritchie, and Sam Stokes from Sligo Park Hills. A recent traffic study sponsored by both the county and city has found that during morning rush hours, Hilltop, Park Valley and Ritchie Avenue experience traffic volumes that are well over those at which county traffic restrictions may be considered. At the March 1st council meeting, council members aired concerns as reported in The Voice. The council discussed a modern approach of keeping the road grid open for a better flow. What grid? The only road in the city that runs parallel with Ritchie Avenue has already been permanently blocked to through traffic. It's Grant Avenue in Ward 1, also one-way in Ward 3. It was said that the idea that a neighbourhood could seal off their streets from traffic at certain hours was a bit foreign. Has the council never tried turning from Ethan Allen onto Jackson Avenue during rush hours, or from Easton onto Cedar Avenue at any time? There seem to be nothing but stories of constituent complaints, not, I hope, constituents from Jackson, unless they're happy to take down their signs. Maybe some seem to be from this evening's conversation. People are said to be exercised about the plan. Well, they should be, because if the county goes for the plan and the city opts out, the traffic is coming up Mississippi Avenue. Do constituents know that? So council members disagree with us on the merits of the county's plan. Fine. They represent constituents who will see only negative impacts, albeit minor. That's why the county puts the decision in the hands of the county executive and not county council members, I suppose. But the city has no comparable decision-making process. After swapping ideas at the March 1st meeting, council members talked about sending a letter to the county. Was it sent? We remain convinced that the county study represents an equitable solution for both Sligo Park Hills and the city. We'll continue to campaign for restrictions that are actually greater than those that the county proposed. No entry signs on Ritchie and Maple, for instance. We ask you to formally consider that stronger option as part of any input to the county from the city. Residents along Ritchie and Geneva are disappointed that after the historical imposition of public works in our neighbourhood, which some of our residents remember to this day, We are being admonished for not recognizing the greater good. They ask why traffic restrictions taken for granted in other neighborhoods are questioned for Ward 4. If there are better alternatives, then what are they? And how will the county convince us, how will the city convince us and the county that they will work? But what really exercises us is if the county adopts restrictions in SPH, but the city doesn't follow through on its side, sending diverted traffic onto Mississippi, Ritchie, and Geneva. Kudos to Council Member Wright for pointing this out at the March 1st meeting. With an April 9th deadline for the county executive's decision, what is the city's plan? Thank you.
Talked with the county, and they're expecting that we'll give them some input. What we wanted to do was have all of the public comments that had been submitted so that we could look at those. And I believe as of today, sometime this afternoon, we had not received those comments. Do you know if we've received the comments? I don't think we've received them yet, so we're waiting on that. We've been talking a little bit about what the response might be, and my sense is that we're going to try and wrap that up as quickly as possible to get it into the county. And if we have that ready, what I'd like to do is have a brief discussion on that next week at the council meeting. So we're going to try and wrap that up quickly, but we wanted to make sure we get all the input.
Richard, are you leaving? Okay, you made a couple of points. Can I interject here just 1 second? You made a couple of points that I felt were directed at me, so I wanted to respond. You asked about Grant Avenue, which is in my ward, and it's not really possible to turn left when you get to the top of Grant Avenue at the junction. I think that's why that street was turned into one-way coming downhill. You might note that it's two-way below the first block. And it's really more of a disadvantage and an imposition on the people who live on Grant who would really prefer to go out to the junction. So that's the first point. You mentioned Jackson, which is not in my ward, but you also noted that someone asked that it might be better to open the grid and take down that sign. So that's kind of an answer to your second point. And to the broader point about city and county relationships, I know that I'm irritated, and I sense that some of my colleagues are irritated because there is precious little relationship between the city and the county as regards this particular action, that the county is going ahead in its own way, which you feel I'm sure feels a good way, but in my opinion is a very narrow kind of a report which leaves a lot of important facts aside, in addition to the most important thing, which is not paying attention to the people outside the county boundaries, which is what I'm most concerned about and which many of my constituents are concerned about. So I hope that addresses some of the points that you made.
My name is Pepe Contreras from 117 Ritchie Avenue. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all your time and effort in pursuing the greater good for the city of Takoma Park. I'd like to add some comments. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that Ritchie Avenue and Geneva neighbors were not and have not been the first to ask for restrictions. In fact, we did, after knowing from this county study that implementing the traffic restrictions on Slego Hill will merely just move the problem to the city. And because of that, and because of the traffic problem that we already have, the city engineer, Mr. Murad, will be happy to tell you that that's the case, that we are pursuing some traffic restriction that will prevent the problem. Given that we have a daycare center, we have a park, we have a lot of children, that we have no sidewalks on Geneva, we have only one on Ritchie. We have the traffic from the public works, we have the bus, the police. I mean, we have everything going through that street. And I have seen accidents. I live on the curve of Ritchie. My neighbor across the street, 2 cars on the yard that, police chase went and pursuing a car there. It's not a safe place, and you can imagine that if these restrictions are put in place, this can be very dangerous and unsafe for our children. I don't think you want safety to take a second place. Second, we are not afraid to ask for restrictions. In fact, I have asked the city clerk for a list of all traffic restrictions within the city of Tacoma Park, and she has kindly and promptly replied that we take a few days to get that information. And I will be happy to forward that to you. If you're talking about a grid for traffic, I will encourage you then to to rescind all the traffic restrictions in the city of Tacoma Park so that we can have better traffic, but don't penalize the Ward 4. I think you maybe forgot that you have those restrictions in your own ward. And if that's the case, the list will provide that information. I don't think you want to penalize them because we have a daycare, we have bad sidewalks or lack of them. I don't think that's what you want. I think that you are caring people, and I just ask you that don't let the council place those restrictions without addressing our problem here. So I really think that you're pursuing the great good here, and I would like you to really go back and think about the consequence of not having these restrictions, and also think, how we can improve the sidewalks and save money rather than paying consultants to tell us what to do. I think we can do it. I think, every council member, he can talk with the neighborhood and make a decision of priority. We don't need to go outside and pay for that. We can do it here. Thank you.
Mayor Williams, I'm going to make Pepe. I'm going to just say that in my ward, speaking from personal experience, in the lower part, in the Pinecrest area, there were a number of no right turn, no left turn, no right, and it was all put in place some years back to try to calm traffic or to restrict cut-through traffic. And there was, through our Department of Housing and Community Development last year, quite a lengthy study about what makes for traffic calming and what are the best things. And there were a number of speed humps, and a traffic table or two on 4th Street. And all of those signs that restricted traffic and cut through were taken away. So that's in my mind, a more modern approach to the issue. I'm not saying that the cut through isn't bad already in Ritchie, or that it wouldn't be worse in the future, particularly if the Sligo Park Hills streets were cut back. What I am saying is that there's a more modern way of approaching this than just stopping people and forcing them onto the arterials, and that's the part that I really have trouble with.
Hi, I'm Wayne Willis, 121 Ritchie. I think my neighbors have already pretty much summed it up, but I wanted to address that specifically. We have a number of speed bumps along Ritchie Avenue. I can tell you from experience, they do very little good, at least on our street. We've witnessed, I have a curb cut, my neighbor has a curb cut. We've actually witnessed cars put one tire up on the sidewalk so that they can avoid the speed bump. So it's actually creating a worse problem. So I wouldn't put too much confidence and faith in speed bumps. And particularly what we're most concerned about is if the county does go forward with their restrictions, it could double or triple the traffic on our street. Virtually every house on our street has a small child or an elderly person. If you look at the traffic statistics, the people who are most vulnerable to car accidents, hit and runs, just car accidents for pedestrians, small children, elderly people. Also, if you're familiar with Ritchie Avenue, we have a hairpin curve. We have several steep hills down Geneva, down Ritchie. It's really a pretty hazardous environment, and I actually witnessed that car flying into my neighbor's yard across the street. She actually wanted to be here tonight, but couldn't because she had to work. She works 2 jobs, and that's actually another component of our situation on Ritchie Avenue. We have a very mixed SES. A lot of people working 2 jobs. They can't be home when their kids come home from work. And so what you have is a lot of unattended children playing out there in the afternoon during rush hour. It's a big concern for us. And, we don't think, and we think really what this all boils down to, You know, we've heard all of the issues and all of the churn about this. It really boils down to an issue of safety versus convenience. We come down on the side of safety. We think the City Council should as well. Thank you.
Anybody else have any public comments?
Hi, I'm Roz Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association and Main Street Tacoma. I wanted to invite everyone to the Art Hop activity we're doing this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We have over 30 local artists exhibiting in what is now over 30 local businesses, from the Tacoma Junction down to 4th Street on the other side of the metro station. In each location, there will be a reception for the artists in that business. Most of the businesses now have signs up on their doors saying when the reception is for their specific artist. We're also getting it online. If you check mainstreettacoma.org, there's a lot more information about this. In addition, we'll have street performers. We've got jugglers and musicians, and I have someone doing human statue. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm hoping people will come out. Thank you, Councilmember Wright, for your information about the businesses. I did want to say we have 5 new businesses opening in the next 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, depending on how the permitting process goes for everybody. And I think that's definitely something to celebrate, and I wanted Council to know about it. I also wanted to add quickly that we have a couple big public arts projects that are in the works, and I wanted to make sure you also knew about those. One is the Tacoma Metro Station. WMATA has finally given final approval for Sam Gilliam as the selected artist. The DC Arts and Humanities Commission has allocated $250,000 for the art that will go on the underpass, on the far wall from the metro station in the underpass. It's a beautiful piece of glass Italian tile work that he's doing. We also have that on our website. If you want to check mainstreettacoma.org, it's under press, and there's some photos of his conceptualization. In addition, we're working on a mural on the Westmoreland wall across from the gazebo park, the long white wall that's close to the intersection with Carroll. And we're working with Arts for the People, Alice Sims and Lori Stepp, who did the beautiful mural on the side of the library, as well as Charlie Pilzer of Airshow Mastering, Bruce Levin, who owns the wall itself. It's kind of a coming together of a number of different groups working on it. So we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to get the funding lined up to make that happen. And Main Street Tacoma is looking at using part of the facade improvement grant that we have from Neighborhood Business Works to try and help with that process. So thank you very much.
I just want to add one other benefit to all of Roz's and OTVA's great work is that even some of the existing businesses have sort of stepped up their game as a result of this increased competition. You know, Mark's, a lovely, loved neighborhood restaurant, has redone its menu and has some great new items, and Everyday Gourmet, which I think were hardworking business people, but many people gave me comments about that business being sort of stale and not really vibrant and exciting. They're closing and going through a 6-week renovation process and reopening with a new kind of concept. I'm not sure, I'm not privy to exactly what the concept is, but I think it'll be, without a doubt, better than what was there before. So.
And looking at the postcard and listening to you speak, it sounds like OTBA is the business association, but Main Street Tacoma appears to be more and more the kind of what we think about when we think about that section between the Junction and 4th Street. Do I have that right?
Main Street Tacoma is the main project of the Old Tacoma Business Association. It's the vehicle that we use for the business retention and recruitment, for promotions, for all the activities and events, from the street festival to smaller concerts at the gazebo. It's the volunteer mechanism. Some of the confusion comes because we have the Main Street designation on the Maryland side from the Junction to the D.C. boundary line. We don't have Main Street designation in D.C. That's a separate process, and we were previously not eligible. So we have used both names, wanting to be as inclusive as we could, and didn't want the DC businesses to be excluded by the Main Street title. But I think Main Street really is the mechanism that the work and the engagement and the community stakeholders and all of that happens in the Main Street philosophy and approach.
So the folks on the 4th Street side, the DC side, still consider themselves part of the Main Street Tacoma brand or something?
We operate as though we have that designation on the DC side, so we don't separate out the activities that would exclude some and include others, with the sole exception of when we have grant money from either the state of Maryland or the DC Council, and those grants have been designated specifically for businesses in those jurisdictions. So, of course, we abide by that.
Maybe I asked for more information than I needed to hear, but it's not, Main Street Tacoma kind of flows off the tongue, so good for you.
If I can just take one more minute, I also notice I often hear people refer to my organization as the Old Town Business Association. And for a long time I thought that was just a slip of the tongue, but I'm now realizing I think it's also a conceptual difference, that in fact the Old Tacoma Business Association includes the Junction and 4th Street and Old Town. And the terminology is important, I think, to get clarified. So thank you for the opportunity.
On that the hearings that both Councilmember Schultz and I testified on in Annapolis last week, those bills tie in very much to what Old Tacoma Business Association is doing, what Main Street is doing. They pull in the Main Street program and one that I hadn't even heard of, which is the Maple Street program, and the attempt is to, at the state level, pull a lot of these programs together under one umbrella, still keep the separate funding streams, but to make the ability to qualify for funds among a lot of different ones a lot easier by basically, if you qualify for one, you're qualified for the whole thing. And there are opportunities in the even in the historic preservation piece for ways that you wouldn't think that the one of the proposals is to make it so that even when there's a building that isn't a historic building in an area with historic properties, that if you're applying for funds or a tax credit and you get money for improvements there, that it would also make it available for those buildings that are kind of, non-historic in the middle of historic properties. And the proposal is to, whereas the historic tax credit for those that are historic properties is 20%, for the non-historic it would be 10%. And for people who think, oh, well, that doesn't really affect the area that Roz was talking about, it does, because what I always think of as the 8-story Adventist Tower is not a historic property, but it would qualify for those types of credits if this legislation took effect. So that there are a lot of things that the Main Street program could take more advantage of if these changes take place at the state, and that's why Councilmember Schultz and I were there testifying. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, the next item is the city manager's comments.
Yes, I'll be brief. I see that there are some members of the Land Use Committee who are waiting to do their report. Just wanted to share with the council that the Public Works renovation project has gone out to bid. Bids will be due on April 15th with an expected start of construction in June. Also just wanted to give the council a brief update on the financing. I did speak to someone at the state. It's taking a little longer than they anticipated because of the problems in the credit markets over the last year. There's a lot of due diligence associated with the issuance of bonds, and since the state is sort of a pool entity, it's a little bit different than some of the rating agencies are used to working with. They did indicate that they were meeting with Moody's, which is one of the primary bond rating agencies, this week. And so I expect that the actual financing will probably take place sometime in the next 30 to 60 days.
That there was another municipality that was going to be part of that pool who they disqualified from the pool?
I'm not sure if they've made that final decision. There were a number of entities, including the City of Tacoma Park, who have applied They are carefully going through everyone's applications and trying to assess their credit worthiness so they don't drag the rest of the group down, and it's my understanding that there may be one who may be disqualified from participating. We did receive good feedback on our finances, I'm glad to report. The last item I had is just to ask the chief if he could just speak briefly about some recent arrest made by his department.
Good evening. Last Monday, I told you we looked like we had some good suspects, and we've made 3 arrests, 3 juveniles, one who's been charged as an adult. In Tacoma Park, we've charged them with 4 burglaries. There's 10 others that we will close by exception because we have enough evidence that would indicate that they were responsible for them based on our investigation. As a result, the night of the when these arrests took place, one of the young people lived in Bethesda. He was formerly of Tacoma Park, and his mother had owned a place down here, and he had been in Tacoma Park when a lot of this crime occurred and was coming back to visit us to participate. We executed a search warrant with the assistance of Montgomery County at a residence in Bethesda, which resulted in more evidence being recovered from our burglaries here in the city. The good news from Montgomery County, which we have an excellent working relationship with, they were able to charge the individual that was been now charged as an adult with 13 cases of burglary and theft. They were also able to close 30 additional cases of burglary and theft in Montgomery County. Our indications are, and I'm not making any accusations at this point because it's still under investigation, is these individuals were part of a group that was responsible for our crime spree last summer when we were having all the cars broken into. And unfortunately, a lot of that property has now been sold, but we're still working on it, and we may be able to close a lot of those burglaries also. We're looking at all those cases. One of the questions that's always asked of me in the department when we make these cases, why weren't these juveniles charged as adults? The 2 that reside here in Tacoma Park could not be charged as adults because they're not a crime of violence. We can ask the state's attorney to look at it, but based on our experience in the past, they will not charge them as adults. The other individual had handguns in the residence in relationship to drugs, which is a felony, and were able to charge him as an adult. The state's attorney's office is reviewing that case and all these other cases that this individual is being charged with, both in Montgomery County and Tacoma Park. They're reviewing that to see if we can charge him as an adult, which would mean, obviously, we feel better penalties. Another question that's raised when we make these arrests is why don't these kids go to jail or go to noise? I will tell you that on the day of this case, myself and Lieutenant Sipperly were in touch all day with the juvenile authorities, and we were unable to get them to agree, even on the basis of the multitude of cases, to put these kids in noise just so a hearing could be held before a judge, because it's not a crime of violence. This is not something new. It's always been the law. It just seems like today the crimes seem to get more serious and multiple. This crime spree put fear in our community, and I know that. And the good thing is we do have them under arrest. The bad thing is they are back on the street, but obviously we will keep them under eye, and we know who they are and where they live, and hopefully they learned a lesson. I won't guarantee that, but we are monitoring their behavior with the juvenile authorities, and we won't hesitate to let the juvenile authorities know if there are any further breakups. But these young people were responsible for this recent crime spree, probably last summer. They were very sophisticated in what they did. They had what I call toolkits to get into locks. They had gloves, which eliminated prints for us. They wore masks. I will say this, that the description that the citizens gave us that came from Sunday's burglary and Saturday's burglary after I got back was on the money, because yours truly had just got back and was coming to work on Tuesday when these 2 characters are walking down the street. We had a citizen call them, which was great, that the 2 suspects she had seen earlier that she knew was the suspect for the information. She called. I saw him walking up the street. It was probably the best description I've ever seen. I said, well, this is easy. And within minutes, we had the entire department on these 2 young people, and they had stolen property and drugs on them at the time of we stopped them. We already had identified them. And just to let you know how we identified them, on Saturday, before I came to the council on Monday, we had gotten pictures where credit card had been used, and because these individuals are known to us and are gang related, our officers were able to quickly identify the 2 of them. As we worked during the day after we arrested them, we had some great cooperation from Montgomery County School Resource Officer at Bethesda. We were working on a nickname, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had the nickname, a picture, and we had a complete identification. So there was a lot of good work. Detective Joe Butler, who's our rookie detective, it's his first big case, and after 36 hours, we allowed him to go home, but did an outstanding job, as all our detectives. This was a department-wide case, but I have to compliment the detective who was the lead on it, who got it started and took it along. And we appreciate all the cooperation of the citizens.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the great police work that went into solving the case. And I had a really question for the city manager, and that is, in the past, we've had, years ago, the city police department and recreation department had programs to really reach out to the young people who are at greatest risk for getting into this type of trouble, and also for reaching out to the young people who did get arrested in situations like this, maybe not as multiple crimes like this, but and I just wonder why we don't do that type of work anymore.
I'll be quite candid with you. To do programs like that and do them right, I'd need at least 1 or 2 more officers, because it's a full-time job to do it right, Councilman Siemens. And I welcome it. I've done them in other places, but right now we're down 2 officers right now in the process of another hiring process to hire people on. We also have 1, 2, several officers off on injuries, so that reduces it. Our main goal is to keep the streets, have enough in patrol, and the detectives to do it. We would probably need at least 1 or 2 officers to put together a good community outreach type program that you're suggesting, which I have done in other jurisdictions.
And I think when it is done and done well, it helps to reduce the number of officers you need in enforcement eventually, not
It'll take a while, but yeah,
right.
That's been known to happen. I don't disagree with you there.
Right.
That's why I haven't been able to do it. My resources, based on feedback from every one of you up here, and I know what the citizens think when one of these crime sprees, I know what you went through recently. We've put our resources in reducing crime, which we have been successful at, and our numbers show that. But I agree with you. It's a great idea, but it takes resources to do it.
And I would encourage my colleagues on the council to think about, when we're allocating resources in the new budget year, of what is the biggest bang for the community, and this is a type of program that I think would be very advantageous. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you. Okay. Is there any legislative update? Okay. We'll take a short break, and we'll come back for the final 2 items. So why don't we... also let you know that we've been having some discussions among ourselves about how lately our meetings have been going late, and so we're trying to have some discipline about how long we talk and how long others talk and how long presentations take and all of that stuff.
And you see we're doing well.
So we're all trying, and anything you can do to help would be appreciated.
Well, I think that we'll be happy to accommodate. I'm Eileen Sobeck, the chair of the committee, and with me is Ann Hollander, the vice chair. And our committee was established by resolution in March 2008. It took a few months to kind of get up and running, get the membership established, so I don't think we've actually been meeting for 2 whole years, but we have been meeting every month or every other month for the last 18 months or so. And our charge, we won't bore you by going into the details, but attached to this, to the blue sheet, is a copy of the original resolution that basically says that we're supposed to provide be advisors to the to the city council on matters related to the future use of the property currently occupied by the Washington Adventist Hospital. And the city, through the city attorney's office, has taken the lead on the certificate of need process and what role the city was going to take in that. And I think at the beginning, there was a little back and forth between the committee and the city council about whether the city was going to do that directly or whether the committee would provide advice on that. But in the end, the city took the lead directly. And what the committee did was really educate itself on a number of matters, what the various processes would be for a change in the use of that piece of property, what the current plans of Washington Adventist Hospital were for redevelopment, and I know the city has been looking into that as well directly, and I think that we can all agree that it's somewhat fluid, and there have been sort of a lack of specifics in terms of the finances and what I think that the hospital has put forward some plans of what they would like to do, but how committed and locked into that they are, I think, is another question. The committee promulgated a question to go out on the city questionnaire last year to get some feedback from the citizens of Tacoma Park about what they'd like to see the land used for potentially. And we've submitted a report that just sort of summarizes some of the fact-finding and background that we've engaged in. And I think it was all very useful for sort of seeing what the preliminary views of the current owner, the Washington Adventist Hospital, are, and what kind of processes would be involved in moving forward with a change of land use. And getting some initial views of the citizens. But since we're still several years out from the hospital, actually a new hospital being built and the land actually being available for redevelopment, I think that it's been sort of difficult to lock on to a particular task or course of progression for the committee. The original resolution sunsetted this committee after 2 years, which would be this month, and I think it was the sense of the committee that we thought it could still continue to play a valuable advisory role if the council wanted to re-up the committee for another several years, and that would be our recommendation, that we continue to monitor the situation. I think that even though there are no concrete immediate plans for contract on the land or specific plan for redevelopment, that staying ahead of the plan and not sort of being totally reactive to redevelopment plans for a parcel that's that important to the city is really important. We had some initial indications from Montgomery County Park and Planning that the county is thinking of seriously at looking at I'm going to ask Sarah, a neighborhood study as a possible precursor to modification of the master plan for this parcel, and that this committee could play a role in making sure that the city is kept informed, and that we could conceivably serve as a liaison to the community for making sure that that input on that process goes smoothly. I think that if the council thought that extension of the committee's life was a good idea, that we would perhaps scale back our meetings to every other month or so, and unless there was a more active development phase. And we've had a couple of committee members resign, and one committee member passed away, so I think that we would need to add a few more members to make sure that we had a full committee. But we've had a pretty active committee, pretty good attendance at meetings, and we wanted to thank Sarah Daines for her staffing of the committee. And I want to ask Ann if she has anything to add.
Not really. I think you covered it all very well. There was a bit of frustration on the committee, a little bit of lack of clear guidance on the type of advice that the council would find useful from the committee. So if we could receive a bit more, if you choose to extend the life of the committee, it would be helpful if we had some guidance from the council on the things that would be useful to you, for us to gather additional information or provide some form of outreach to the greater community. If we could have a little clearer guidance, it would enable us to, have a bit more productive meetings in those areas. But apart from that, I think we really have gathered some very useful information, kind of brought ourselves up to speed in a way that if things were to start becoming more active with the altered land use for that site or liaison with the Washington Adventist Hospital, I think the committee's sort of well poised to step in and, be up to speed on all of the information and be in a position to help provide advice to the council.
If I can just add a couple things as I was reading your report that you gave us. Thank you for this. I just wanted to comment on a couple places where I had what I thought was a little bit of an update from what you have. And on the section on the planning department and what they might be considering doing, I just noted that in today's proposed county executive budget that Park and Planning is slated for a 13.5% overall decrease in funding. So I wonder how that might affect any of their plans that they have for doing something in this area, and thinking that if it was seen as that if the implementation of anything was pushed off, that they might be looking for areas where they could chop FY11 expenditures, and that this might be an area where they would say, well, sorry, but we've got to delay that. Also, when I last talked to the hospital, what they said was that they thought that, assuming that they got their certificate of need, that it would then be a 30-month time frame for construction of the new campus, so that whatever the time frame is on the CON, that kind of gives an indication of the overall time frame. And there was an item in here where you noted that we had petitioned for the interested party status, and we did receive word in the last 2 weeks that they had denied our request for the interested party status, but that we did have participating entity status. So that was the things that I noted that I thought were of particular interest from the items you provided. You called out a couple other good things, and the one that caught my eye was that the Washington Adventist Hospital asserted that they anticipate a reduction in the amount of traffic generated by any new use. I thought that was kind of an interesting observation, and I guess it all just kind of depends on what goes on there.
I agree. The committee last met one night last week, and we did have somebody from Park and Planning there, and that was obviously before the budget came out, and I don't think we know whether the item is still in the budget. We were told that of all the potential master plan amendments that the county was going to look at, that this was the number one. So I don't know whether they axed everything or not. So I agree that that's a relevant issue. And I'm not quite sure what to say about the construction window. It's sort of the until the hospital closes its doors here and moves to a new facility, they could change their minds. On the other hand, one has to think that the closer they are to getting a certificate of need and starting in on construction, the more they'll be thinking seriously about what their plans are for this property. So, I think it's a little bit of a moving target, and I think that we sort of went back and forth on the committee and saying, well, maybe nothing's going to happen for a couple of years, and we should take a hiatus and reinstitute the committee later. On the other hand, we thought, well, they're not, WA's not going to wait till the last minute to make a decision, and we ought to be keeping track. And I know the city is through staff. We don't mean to say that we would be the only avenue, but in terms of kind of being an adjunct and providing advice and being a liaison to the committee, I think that the consensus of the committee was that it was still likely to be a prudent function over the next couple of years.
Yeah, my sense is that it would be a whole lot better to have a continuing committee that, even if it's necessary, kind of lays low for a while, and be ready to start back up again, rather than having to start all over and reinvent things and resolicit people. And as you noted, it took a couple of months to kind of get up and running. And so my vote would be to go ahead and extend the committee, recognizing that you every other month or quarterly or whatever might work may be the way, with an ability to shift as things change through time.
I think we'd want to, if you decided that you wanted to consider extending the committee, we might want to propose some changes to the original resolution that would make sure that our mandate was broad enough to work with the county, and maybe a couple of other little tweaks based on our experience. But.
Comments, observations, Councilmember Clay?
Thanks for coming. I would like to see the committee stay engaged. Like you said, you have momentum, and I think the timeline is uncertain. It's good and you have a good group of people, I think, that have been engaged and worked on this. I would certainly be, I did introduce the original resolution. I would certainly be interested in revamping it. I'm particularly interested in how the committee could also help us with the community outreach and keeping people engaged, so that there's not all of a sudden a surprise new activity in their neighborhood. And I think that the committees in the city are probably one of our more effective vehicles for this, because those of you who are on the committee are your neighborhood level leaders in the community and have the best connections there. So I think I'd like to focus on that, and the master plan, and supporting the master plan development and input, and gathering community input around that. I'm looking at the concerns, and I see that you did a survey on what was most important to respondents, and environmental impact was the most important, and then tax base and impact on traffic were kind of tied. And I wonder how much tax base issues will drive any future development plans around the site, and also if some of the financial concerns that we face now will also change people's idea about mixes around tax base issues versus other kinds of issues. And I think that would be maybe worth revisiting in a couple of years also.
This is sort of new feedback that we just got from the resident survey that the city conducted. And so I think I'd like, maybe one of the tasks of the committee to go through the individual comments to try to get a better handle on sort of where they all broke down, and what the overall concerns were of the community as expressed by those individual comments. So I could see us doing that.
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you both for coming. I completely support your continuing on. If you're okay with that, sounds like a great idea. And is Mary Beth O'Quinn still working with you?
Yes.
Say hi to her for me. I think she's a great staff.
Very actively. She's been very helpful to the committee and very passionate about the issues. So.
I do want to thank you for coming and all the work you guys have been doing for quite a long time. And I also would support the committee continuing. And I also support expanding the mandate to cover some more of these issues that you were talking about, and some others too as well. Because this issue is going to be a very long-term process. While the hospital may think they're going to get their new hospital built in 30 months, I admire their optimism. I believe 2005, if I'm not mistaken, was when they first started talking about this, and we are 5 years later. So it wouldn't surprise me if we have at least another 5 years before something happens.
Sounds like Councilmember Schultz.
Again, thank you. I'm new to the council. I wasn't here when you guys got started, but clearly you have made a commitment to really educate yourselves, and that's an extraordinary resource for the city to have a group of people like yourself who have spent all this time. And it makes no sense to me other than to do what all the council members have said, is to keep you guys active in whatever capacity seems to make sense for the duration. And to me, I know that the hospital says that it wants to continue to own the property. but I wouldn't place any more credence in that than I have a feeling you do, or that they're going to be out of there in 30 months. That's their thinking now, and why not say that? Because that's the safest thing to say, because they're not going to say the opposite, oh, we can't wait to get rid of this property. They want to keep all their options open. But my sense is that an institution like that gets moving northwards to its new location, it's going to be focused greatly on its new opportunities there, and they're not going to, I would just have this is just guesswork on my part. Tacoma is going to look like history to them, like this is where we used to be. So who knows what the opportunities may be, and so therefore I would encourage your committee to be as open and imaginative in your thinking as to how that land could be used, given the proximity of the university that's there, right across the street. Extraordinary assets that are in those buildings, and what the potentials might be. I mean, it could be just an extraordinary opportunity to preserve or keep jobs, and have some kind of health or other kind of institutional use there. Maybe the university wants to expand. It's not for me to even begin to start and I would imagine that some of you have already been thinking in that direction, and forgive me for suggesting if you haven't, because I think there's just huge opportunity. So I look forward to, as we all do, what this is all going to come to.
Sounds like we're in agreement that you should continue. We'll put a resolution on next week's meeting so that you don't have any pause in your mandate. And Sarah, if there's anything that you can provide in that in way of expanded mandate, that would be helpful to do it all at once. If that's a time crunch to have that done, we ought to at least do the continuation. Sounds like it's possible to do it all. Good. So we'll have that next week, and you'll keep on the path.
Thank you for your support. I will be out of town next week on spring break with the kids, but I'm sure, I don't know whether Anna's available or somebody from the committee will be here.
You don't need to be.
Okay. Well, thank you for your support, and I think we would like to recruit a few new members to round out our membership, and then I think at some point we would like to invite you, Mayor Williams, or whichever council members might be interested to just come give a little pep talk to the committee and let them know that, that you do think that this is valuable work. Because I think there was a little bit of struggling from time to time about whether, I think people were really put their shoulders to the grindstone, and they would appreciate getting a little bit of feedback. So that would be wonderful.
I'd be willing to venture that if it was an invitation to any of us who might like to come to one of your meetings, that you'll find us fighting each other off.
Yes.
I'd also like to just take a moment and thank the members of the committee who aren't here tonight for their diligent work over at least 18 months that we were meeting, because there was a lot of really good community effort put into the knowledge gathering, and some real concerned citizens that were a part of the committee. So
Thank all of you very much.
thank you.
And we are now to our last item for the evening, which is a special session, first reading ordinance awarding a bid for the purchase of general obligation bond to be issued by the city for the purpose of paying the state retirement and pension system of the Maryland deficit. And if the city manager would like to speak to this issue, and we also have a additional information piece, the salmon piece that was at your places.
The majority of the city's non-sworn personnel are covered by the state retirement and pension system of Maryland. And as we talked about at the end of November, this was a follow-up discussion to the city's presentation of the audit. The city has a deficit unfunded liability that was has been amortized over 40 years, with the payments beginning in 1995, I believe it was. We basically make an annual payment each year. It's accounted for in the non-departmental budgetary unit, and the estimated payment for next fiscal year is just over $82,000. As we talked about at the end of November, staff believes it would be financially advantageous to the city to pay this deficit off using tax-exempt financing. And one of the things that is on the salmon-colored sheet that was passed out this evening kind of illustrates the importance of doing this, or at least the financial advantages. Like most retirement systems, they're going to assess an interest rate that is equivalent to what the rate of return on their investments is assumed to be in their actuarial assumptions. And so at this time for the state, that is 7.75%. I think it was previously 8%. And that's not an unusual rate of return that would be expected in any kind of retirement system. Looking at a long time frame, actually we assume for our own police pension system an annual rate of return of 8%. But what has been happening is, if you look at the data on the salmon sheet, is we're making these payments that are going up by 5% every year, yet you have a higher interest rate being assessed. So it's not quite this bad, but it's almost like making the minimum payment on a high interest rate credit card. So you stay current, but you never get ahead. And if you look at the information we provided this evening, if you go back to July 1st of 2005, the amount of the deficit was about $1.34 million. If you look at it as of July 1st of 2009, it's $1.49. So that was one of the reasons, in looking at this, why the staff has recommended that we essentially refinance this using tax-exempt general obligation bonds. With the council's concurrence back at the end of November, we did prepare and issue a request for proposals that was released in February. We sent it to, I believe, almost about 10 financial institutions, and we suggested that the respondents provide several options, a fixed rate term of 10 years, 15, and 20 years. We received 2 responses. One was from SunTrust Bank, the other from TD Bank. SunTrust did provide options for 10, 15, and 20, though they only provided fixed rates for for the 10 and 15. The 20-year had what they refer to as a put provision, which basically means that 10 years they can renegotiate the rate at their discretion. The city could either accept that rate or essentially pay off the entire note. TD Bank only provided an option for 10 years. And there were some differences between the 2 proposals in terms of the bank fee that they assessed. The recommendation of the staff is to award a bid to SunTrust Bank. Council may want to discuss this point. I guess as your financial advisor, Ms. Brooks and I would always recommend trying to take the option that results in less interest cost. Obviously, when you do that, there are higher payments each year. But our recommendation was to accept the 10-year fixed rate, which is 3.59%. That would equate to an annual payment of about $167,000 a year, with interest cost over the life of the issuance of just over $272,000. If the council is more comfortable, we could accept the maturity of 15 years. Not surprisingly, there's a higher interest rate associated with that, so it's 3.99%. It would lower the payment by about $43,000 per year, but you'd pick up not quite $200,000 of additional interest cost for doing that. So I think either of those options, I think, are certainly better than where we're at today, trying to pay off the state. We have requested, it's part of the requirement, is to get a new actuarial valuation from the state. We did not have the most recent information for 2009 at the time we issued the RFP. So the RFP called for a maximum bond amount of up to $1.4 million. Based on the information we got after the RFP was issued, obviously the deficit amount as of July 1st of 2009 was 1.49. So if we do want to pay off the entire amount, we will likely use some fund balance monies to supplement any bonding.
So under the current scenario, the amount of the deficit has kept growing.
Yes.
We have, if we did nothing, we would have 24 more years of payments. And if we kept paying at the current rate of $82,000, but it increased 5% per year, we would still probably have, under this scenario,
A deficit.
an increased amount of deficit at the end of that time, and we would have paid for 40 years, and we would be worse off than when we started.
Right.
And if I can just remind my colleagues that the reason that we got into this to begin with, since I think I remember the conversation correctly in 1995, was that the state did a new actuarial assessment of what the amounts owed were, and kind of surprised everybody by saying, oh, by the way, we've just refigured and recalculated, and you owe us X. And that we and Hagerstown and a few others were high up on the list in terms of the amounts. It was news to everybody that this was owed. There were efforts made, I believe, 2 consecutive years in the legislature to reduce the amount of deficit that we needed to pay off on. Those amounts were reduced, thanks in large part to the city of Hagerstown and some others who worked on this. And if we do nothing, we're just we're just putting the disaster off to our successors. But we decided in November with this discussion that we didn't want to do that. And so I think we've got a good alternative in front of us. Councilmember Wright.
So by my calculation, we're only paying like 5.5% of the now, which is 1.49 million, which is less than the 7.5% interest they're charging us. And the bond is like 3.9, 3.
Yeah, it's either 3.59 or 3.99.
Yeah, so to me, it's sort of like a simple arbitrage option, right? Like, we basically save money by doing this financially.
That's correct.
And
the question is, do we want to do that?
Right. I mean, to not do it is like.
It's not a question.
But I do think we should be careful to say that we won't end up with a deficit at some point in the future, because the state could, their formulas could get redone about life expectancy, and the state could come back to us and say, oh, it's actually this now. So it seems like they made a big correction, and they're probably more on top of it now, but we should just be clear that
This isn't the magic bullet that solves it forever.
Right.
Well, and if I may just note, I mean, actuarial assumptions are always and should be periodically reviewed. Very painful lesson for the city, but if you look at our own police pension plan, the actuary revised their assumptions based on the unfortunate rate of disability. So it's hard to criticize, I think, the state for going back and reviewing things. We've done that ourselves, and truthfully, it's been to our detriment to do that. But I think it will certainly solve the problem for the immediate future and probably for some time out. I've gotten no indication that the state is planning to revisit its assumptions in any wholesale fashion anytime soon.
The 2 remaining comments I would say are, one, I'm glad we're not deciding to pay it off with cash, not only because we don't really have that now, but also because I think it is fair to spread that out over a duration of time so that it's not like the people who are residing in the city right at this moment are paying for it. Seems logical. And I can't remember my other comments.
Councilmember Clyde.
I just would like to move the ordinance. I support it, and I think that we should move forward with it.
Okay, this was moved by Councilmember Clyde, second by Councilmember Sniffer. And since Councilmember Sniffer got the second, I'll call on Councilmember Schultz so he doesn't feel he got to say the second.
Yeah. This is really a no-brainer. It's not a question of whether or not we should do this. We have a fiduciary responsibility, and if we didn't do it, we deserve to be shot, I think.
No, come on.
How about?
Let's not give the people ideas.
Just bows and arrows? Oh, okay. I think so. The only question in my mind is whether or not this should be a 10-year or a 15-year or amortization, and that's the classic issue you face anytime you do long-term financing like we did with the Public Works bond. Same questions get raised. On the shorter term means that you're making higher cash out-of-pocket payments but saving interest, cumulative interest for the duration of the whole financing. The longer term means just the opposite, that you're keeping more money, cash in your pocketbook, but you're going to pay longer, more accumulated interest over the long term. So,
Do you come down on one side of the
well,
aisle?
since cash seems to be very, very dear to us these days, given the really tight situation that we're in, and there's no certainty that this tight situation is going to necessarily end in one fiscal year, I think I'd be kind of inclined to go towards the 15-year term to preserve cash, our cash flow.
I have a different concern. I share Fred's concern about being cash short. The other is that one other reason for not doing this might be that our payment would increase from roughly 80-some-odd thousand to 124, 25, 160 or 70,000 per year, and that's a substantial jump in a time when we're pretty financially strapped. So there's a concern there. Yes, it's true we save money, but if you don't have the cash, it's hard to justify. So I tend to be in the camp of let's do a 10-year because we save the most money. But I am cognizant that that may mean we don't have cash for other things we want to do in the city.
Someone I know said that the next 20 years are going to be nothing like the last 20 years, so I think that doing the 10 years is more prudent because the quicker we pay it off, the better.
I tend to also be in the camp of the 10-year payout because I look on it as you may have a little less cash in those first 10 years, but those last 5, the difference between the 10-year and 15-year, you're not paying anything in terms of this particular loan. As the city manager pointed out, there may be something else that comes down the pike, and I think it would give us the ability, if the reevaluation of the situation by the state were to happen, it's more likely to happen, say, 10 years out than 15 years out, and we'd be in a better position to say, well, we finished paying that one off, and now if there's some other little piece that we got to deal with, we can kind of take a portion of what we were using to deal with it. That's what we're seeing.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't been keeping track of the decisions that each individual council member have voiced, but I would go with the 10-year.
Councilmember Wright.
I just had a question about, to the city manager, do we have any concern about this impacting our bonding ability in the future or our rating or the interest rates we'd get on other bonds? Like, what does this do to our total debt ratio? Is there any concern there?
I don't have any concerns about that. I mean, realistically, we have an unfunded liability that's sitting out there anyway, and I think this is a much more prudent financial way of addressing it, and not only for the city financially, but for those employees who are in the state system, that they have a fully funded pension benefit.
Okay, any other comments? Any public comment?
Just a couple next steps for the council. In addition to this ordinance, which will be a 2-reading ordinance because it is not in the budget at this time, there is also another step which is actually a 2-reading ordinance that would authorize the general obligation bond issuance itself. It seems a little backwards, and City Attorney's Office and I had some discussion about that, but part of it is we didn't know who would be the successful bidder, what the rates would be, what the schedules would look like, and all of that is part of the actual general obligation bond ordinance itself. So that will be coming forward, and there is a required public hearing on April 5th with second reading of the ordinance on April 19th, and then we're hoping to close on the bonds and to pay off the state on or around April 23rd. So I just wanted to let you know there would be some future legislative action coming before the council related to this.
And you can point out that we're helping their financial situation by paying off a debt, and so they have more cash. And they can remember that.
Probably the people I'm talking to are not the ones I need to be talking to.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of this first reading ordinance that's been moved, and at this point we do or do not need to say that it would be a 10-year or a 15-year piece?
The ordinance actually states that it is a 10-year issuance.
Okay. And so that was moved as
Yes, I
drafted?
move it as a 10.
Okay. So, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. That's our last item for the meeting.
Before you adjourn, Mayor, could you give us an update on the time? How did you do tonight?
It's 9:54. We are out before 10 o'clock.
And what does it say on the agenda?
10 o'clock.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to all of us. We're adjourned.